Welcome to my presentation on spirituality, faith, and God. Over the course of this semester, there were so many pedagogies that I found interesting and doable. For the purposes of this final project, I chose encounter, instruction, reflection, and goals. Spirituality and faith, God, these are all things that we kind of expect kids to have some vision of without ever really letting them ask the hard questions, going a little bit deeper beneath the surface. So while I didn't have the time that I wanted to delve into this, I did want to seek out the questions um, that would create some thought-provoking dialogue for my students. Eliana Light in her Eli talk really gave a good vision of how we see God, and not only how we teach God in many cases and in many Hebrew schools. I 100% agree with her on this God gap, and I think that we should work in teaching kids about spirituality, creating a relationship with God so that we can bridge that gap. So, in my quest to discover God with my students, I wanted to have real discussions about spirituality, Judaism, and how does God fit into these things. These are hard questions. I don't always understand them myself. I am a very fact-driven person, analytical by nature. Embracing this abstract was hard for me. So, along with my students, I was opening up my own spirituality over the course of this past year. Was I out of my comfort zone? Absolutely. I wanted a lesson plan that I could use with all of my classes because I did have kids from vast array of ages. So I wanted to be able to utilize that. I anticipated that the responses would be different. So I worked with grades 3 to 7, affiliation of conservative reform, and I did two lessons per class. The book I used was God in Between by Sandy Eisenberg Sasso. I used this book because, one, it doesn't pertain to a religion and doesn't mention Judaism. Two, the pictures are phenomenal and enticing. There also seemed to be a message that's familiar to students, and I really thought it could lead to these provoking dialogues. To me, education and learning, it's like a shopping bag. The kids come in, and of all the things you deliver, they'll only pick and choose certain things that they'll take away with them in their little shopping bag. So, as an educator building a lesson, I need to think, what is it that I want them to take away? What's the most important thing that they take out of this lesson if they take nothing else? When I was watching Rabbi Eben Leder's lecture on goals, I think that's a fascinating point he made, that we don't really set a goal for our students and what we want them to take out of this. What do they want to achieve at some point beyond the bar bat mitzvah? And uh, while he discussed prayer, I really think a goal can be for anything or anyone who's looking to change, grow, or evolve. So, who are we? Who are we to become? And how does my Judaism, spirituality, and faith enter into this equation? My own goals as an educator in setting this up was to open a platform for students to have discussions, a safe place where they could speak openly. I wanted them to know that we didn't have to figure it all out in one lesson. There was no right or wrong answers. I wanted to contemplate along with my students about where does spirituality fit in with God, and why do we have faith, and how can we connect to God on a personal level. And I wanted students to be able to safely exit their own comfort zone and dig a little deeper to find meaning. I felt that the students, based on their age level, should be able to articulate in one way, shape, or form. They should be, as the educator, I should relay the premise of the lesson clearly. It should be well laid out to maximize understanding. And while it was an open discussion, I still wanted people to be respectful, and I made sure that we discussed how there was no judgment. This is my seventh
grade. I put
graders.
this word up here. What does it say to you? Spirit. Ghosts. Ghosts. What else?
Memories. Things I don't have. You don't have memories. Feelings. Energy. Explosion. I don't know why, but bad airlines. Yes. Bad airlines. What?
Yeah.
Spirit Airlines.
This word. And I had.
Religion. I don't think I've ever
What do you think
religion.
of that?
I don't think I've ever noticed that those words are
And
so
I
cool.
think it's spiritual.
Religion, emotion.
Religion.
Emotion.
Emotion.
Well, explosions. Why do you think of explosions?
I don't know.
Explosions of everything.
What else do we think of when we see this word move from spirit to spiritual?
Prayers.
What's that?
Prayers.
So this was my seventh grade discussing spirit versus spiritual. And as you see, we got a vast array of responses. This is the second grade being asked the same thing.
Really long word.
Superlative. Spirituality. Spirituality.
Nice.
Spirituality.
So she says spirituality. What does it mean that you root for your team? Hooray, go, whatever your school mascot is, right?
My school mascot is a bee.
You know, go Patriots.
In football.
In Massachusetts, we root for the Patriots, right? Well, if I just add a U, A, and an L, and I say you're spiritual, does that change the whole meaning of the word?
Yeah.
Why?
Because, like,
Now what am I asking?
you're wise and loving kind of thing.
What does it mean to be spiritual? Do you have to be religious to be spiritual?
No.
No.
Pray.
So praying, sometimes when you're spiritual, you pray. What else can you do when you're spiritual?
You think about others.
You think about others. What else? Who comes to mind when you think about spirit?
So this was the second grade responding to the same question. And I thought that it was very interesting that second and seventh graders both connected emotion to spirituality. So to set up a lesson plan utilizing the pedagogies, I had to set the encounter. So I did have a place, time, and I dedicated an allotted amount of time for these lessons. The environment was safe, open for sharing and expression. I sought to further expand their thought process, and I wanted to give them time to express themselves through dialogue, writing, and art. So I felt having the discussion prior was very important because as an educator, it gave me an idea of mindset, and I could use that in our later dialogues together. There was a difference between second and seventh grade. They had similar patterns of what they feel is spiritual, but both ages were enticed. They enjoyed sharing their thoughts. I could tell that this was somewhat new to them. Instruction, there was a lesson set with a book that was conducive to the program. We followed an initial discussion, then there was a discussion after the book. I had a worksheet which gave kids time to write and create a picture. It was a great book to use because it open the kids to who and where is God? Does God have to be a boy? And do we have to be spiritual and have faith even if we don't believe in God? The reflection part, students were able to have an open discussion about the meaning. What did the book mean to them? We had a guided discussion with prompts I had prepared. There was writing and art for the final reflective piece. I found in the open discussion that the kids were a little bit bogged down with the details of the story, and it was hard for them to, on their own, look beyond and see the moral of the story. So they couldn't understand why people were called those who see out windows. They couldn't figure out the sneezing through the grass, and why these people seem so dependent on a notion of God that they had not yet conceived. So it we had more of a dialogue in the guided discussion because they seemed to get bogged down in some of the story's facts. They were asked specific questions pertaining to their personal idea of God, and they were able to discuss these ideas of what and how they feel, where do they see God, and I hope develop their initial perception of a personal relationship with God. This was the guided worksheet the kids received. So we're going to see the responses of 13 kids, age 7 to 13. Most of the kids really did internalize and seek to find a connection. I really find kids are naturally just more spiritually inclined than adults, and they're far more open to the abstract views. In Deborah Shine's article, she discusses the spiritual moments. I fully believe I saw some spiritual moments here. I think it would be great if we could develop some pattern for teaching younger kids about spirituality and how they can develop a personal relationship with God. So those were the reflections of the students that they worked on with their drawings. This lesson plan setup was, like I said, over 2 lessons. We discussed spirituality. We discussed whether we need to be religious to be spiritual and how does God fit in. We read the book God in Between by Sandy Eisenberg Sasso. We had an open discussion about the book and then a guided discussion. And then the kids made their writings and drawings. This was a great lesson. The kids did not have a vast amount of experience discussing God in an open and spiritual way. I think the lesson would work better integrated throughout the year. I would like to take things from the video, The God Gap, that I saw after I created this lesson. So I would definitely enhance the lesson a little bit more for next time. I think that this lesson did set up an encounter. It provoked a setting for thinking. We had reflection at multiple times, and the kids really took away something important from these lessons. At the very least, I believe it opened their minds to the possibility of building a spiritual identity. I'm hoping they'll continue to seek answers. My instruction was geared to the goal of seeking where God is and how we can become spiritual individuals and begin to develop self thought on this. The instruction could be improved with more pertinent questions about spirituality and more time. I asked myself if I met my educator goals. I believe I did. It was a safe environment. They didn't have any limitations. We discussed there was no right or wrong answers, and we don't have to figure it all out. We definitely delved into the notion of spirituality and God. We did start to connect the two, even though it was difficult. I don't believe we resolved it completely, but we started to produce some amazing ideas. Most of the students dug deep and were profound, and even though there were kids who initially didn't buy in, I found that they did end up buying in and were very great contributors to our discussions. So I didn't find anybody who didn't contribute. This is the lesson I intend to repeat next year with modifications. I believe that taking this class over this past semester has gotten me to look at my own spirituality differently and evaluate my own relationship with God and how I see God. It is a pertinent part of Jewish education that's lacking. It could be a great tool to improve our educative system, create spiritual moments, and hopefully build more of a spiritual identity. I feel that discussions within this paradigm of spirituality and God could be woven into other topics. It doesn't have to be on its own. It could be put into Israel, prayer, Hebrew, Tanakh. I appreciate that over this past semester I was pushed out of my comfort zone. And I think that by being pushed out of where I'm comfortable, I looked for ways to really improve my teaching methods and how to create engaging lesson plans, maybe in a more abstract way that I wouldn't have thought about before. And I look forward to continuing building these lesson plans that will help students define their spiritual self and build a healthy relationship with God. Thank you.